Welcome to another MaPS stream. This is going to be a quick stream and we're going to be showing you in Adobe Premiere Pro how to colorize footage. So say I've got this clip here, person clip. If I double click on it, you can see it's really green, a little bit blue in there, and it would look fine, but I can tell from doing a bunch of editing that this is a little bit too green and I'd like to change this. So depending on what camera you film this with, your camera may choose a different kind of white balance. And when we talk about white balance, we basically mean what's the overall color that you're going to see during this clip. Is it going to be cool? Is it going to be like a blue sort of color, or is it going to be warm, a bit more orange and a bit more reds and pinks? So your camera can sometimes do this on its own, or if you shoot manually with a DSLR, you'll be able to change the white balance yourself. So when you go out shooting, try and set the white balance to be sort of correct to the eye of what you see in real life. But even when you do that, sometimes your footage may come back like this. So let's fix this clip. I'm going to drag it down onto my timeline here. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click up here onto the top. These are our different layouts for the different kind of tasks we'll do in Premiere. Click on Color. And we have our clip here. And you'll notice that once we've clicked on color, we have all these palettes over here on the right side with all of these sliders. This is where we'll be making our changes. Now, to make sure that these sliders are active, you actually have to have the clip selected. So make sure you click on it and it turns white. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is temperature. Temperature is blue to the left, which is cool, and orange to the right, which is warm. So with my clip selected, I'm just going to drag this first slider left and right. If I bring it to the left, you'll notice that it goes bluer. If I take it to the right, you'll see that it warms up. And now what I'm looking for is to go back and forth until I find a spot that feels a bit closer to real life. So I'd probably say about there. That looks much better. And now once you've done any changes in this lumetri color, so it's called lumetri color over here. It's basically an effect that's applied, and these are all the adjusting sliders. Once you've done a change, you can see the result here. If you want to see what it looks like beforehand, there's an FX button just up the top. You hit that off and then back on. And so you can see already, just with sliding this single slider here, our original footage looks much more cooler, it's bluer, and there's a lot of green. So I like how this is going. So we've done our temperature. Let's move down to the next one, tint. So you can see with tint, there's green on the left and pink on the right. The green, if I slide this to the left, it of course adds more green, looks terrible. Slide it up to the right, and it starts to add a little bit of pink in there. Let's bring this up to 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the penduluming back and forth until I find a spot where I think it looks good. Now that's a little bit too pink. Let's bring it back down and then back up. So I'm just going left and right until I find a spot that feels good. That looks pretty good there. So I've adjusted my temperature up and I've changed my tint to be a little bit pinker. Let's turn this off and on, and that is a crazy difference. So this footage looked okay at the beginning, but once we've made our changes, we realized how much the skin tone was this blue-green sort of color, and now it looks much more natural. Okay, so with a lot of footage, those 2 steps there, that's the quickest and easiest way to make your footage look much, much better. So if you need to do something quickly, just do these first 2, don't worry about anything else. But now what I'm going to do is we're going to do something else. Let's go to the beach. I'm going to bring this beach clip in. So I have this clip here at the beach, and this clip looks pretty good. The color looks okay, but it seems like it's a little bit dark. So what we're going to do is we're going to follow along and do the first 2 steps. So make sure your clip is selected. Let's do the temperature. So let's make the temperature warmer, cooler. So a little bit cooler, that's a little bit too cold. Looks like it's a cold winter day. Let's bring it up just a tiny bit, so only 13. And now let's experiment with the tint. Let's add some green. No, let's add some pink, maybe just a tiny bit of pink. So when you make changes in here, it visually looks like a lot, but over here on the sliders, it may not seem like much. Of course, if you slide them up crazy, you can see a big difference there. Okay, so we've done our temperature and our tint. Now we're going to move down to these extra sliders, and this is where you're going to be changing the light in the image. So it's not really the color, it's how bright areas of it are. The first one is exposure. Let's slide exposure and you'll see what happens. Already that looks way better. So what we're doing here is basically, it's almost like we're brightening the sun on the day when this was filmed. We're making it brighter. Or we're changing settings in the camera that you couldn't do there to make it accept more light through the lens. So let's expose it up a little bit, 1.6. Okay, and the next thing I'm going to do is we're going to check contrast. Let's just see what contrast does. So with any of these sliders, just slide them and see what they do, and see what you think looks better. See, contrast down to the left actually looks a bit better. Let's go about there. Okay, now let's see what the highlights does. Let's slide that up. And you'll notice this is mainly bringing up all the brighter areas of the image. If I bring this up like this, you can see that these buildings get brighter, the sand gets brighter. Let's go about there, okay? And now the shadows. Let's slide the shadows down. The clearest spot is these, of course, shadows here on the sand. Let's slide this down like that, and then back up. Oh, that softens it so much. So that basically gets rid of all the shadows. Okay, I like that. The whites will adjust all of the whites in the image, make them heaps brighter, and you see when it's right at the top, you start to lose the detail in the sand there. We want to keep that detail. We don't want things to blow out. They call it blowing out, and that means it becomes so bright and white that you can't actually see any detail. Okay, so the whites are good, and let's check what the blacks do. Okay, so the blacks basically bring up all of the black areas to the left, makes it look really bad. Okay, let's put that back to 0. You can always click on these numbers, type in a number, and hit return. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's turn this volumetric color effect on and off and see what it looked like before. Okay, wow. I knew the footage was bad at the beginning, but I even forget how bad it was. So you can see that we've got a lot more detail down here in the water. Trees over here, we can see more. Like this spot here with these palm trees, often I turn it off and on. They basically were like black solid before. Okay, so I'm happy with that. Let's now see, now that it's brighter, let's go back up to the top up here. So you can always go back and forth and change color temperature. Let's warm it up a little bit. Let's warm it even more. Let's see if adding pink will help. What about a bit of green? About there. Okay, let's turn that off and on. That looks heaps better. And the last thing we can do is down the bottom here, you'll see saturation. So let's slide saturation up. You see it gets crazy saturated. So what saturation does is it basically makes all the colors stronger and brighter and more saturated. Take it all the way down, you get to black and white. Let's bring up the saturation just a teeny tiny bit. I want this to kind of be a little bit oversaturated. Okay, let's do before and after by hitting the effects button. That's much better. That looks much more like it would have actually felt like being there on the day. Okay, so we've done the beach now. Now, because we've done that lighting adjustment, let's go back to my interview footage here. So this is the one we did first. The color looks all good. Skin tones look nice. The tint and everything, the green, the blues, but I feel like it just needs a little bit of pop in the brightness. So let's go down to these bottom ones and let's do exposure. And you'll notice if I expose it too much, we get blowouts, and that means all the detail in the bright areas basically disappears. So I don't want that too much. Let's bring it up just a little bit, maybe about there. And now the contrast, I think I like how the contrast is. Let's leave it there. The highlights, we want to experiment with those. Too bright, too dark. Let's bring the highlights up a tiny bit. The whites still, if I take them up too high, we get some blowout on the face. About there. Let's see about the shadows. Let's bring the shadows up. You can see this really well in the hair up here. Let's go about there. Okay, the effects off and on. That looks much better. Now I think it still looks a little bit too bright, so I'm going to bring the exposure down just a little bit. So don't be afraid to look at your image and double check and re-slide some things back down. Saturation looks pretty good. If I bring it up too much, you'll see that the face gets really kind of orange and oversaturated. So I'm going to bring that back down. Say about there. Okay, so that looks good. And now when you're working in your color correcting, the palette over here, see where it says basic correction. If I click on that, it actually drops up all those sliders and drops them down. So if at any point you don't know where those sliders are and it looks different and you're saying, what's going on? Each of these main headings are actually a clickable button that will drop up and down their modifiers. So just in case that looks weird. Okay, let's do another one. Let's go to Cafe. This will be a quick one. So again, make sure your clip is selected. And we've got this cafe shot. It looks really good, but you might be starting to notice that already this looks very gray, very blue, very cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just actually going to do one thing on this clip, and that's going to be the temperature, and you're going to see how much of a difference that makes. So let's slide the temperature over to the right, like that, and you'll notice the whites and stuff over here, they're kind of like this soft sort of orange to the white. I click it off and on, makes a big difference there. So that's one slider. My footage actually looks much better. Okay, let's do another one. Let's go to the sky. Okay, we've got a sky clip here, and the sky clip looks good, but it feels all sort of blue. So let's adjust this, and let's give it a bit of warmth. As I do this, you'll notice that the clouds, the white areas over here, start to get this warm tone to them. And what this does is, when the slider is back over to the left, the clouds in the sky seem like they're in the same color family. They're both blue. But when I slide it to the right like this, the clouds now seem separate from the sky. And what that does is it gives a nice kind of contrasting effect for the shot. If I turn it off and on by hitting the FX button, you can see there's a big difference to this clouds in the sky. Nothing much else has changed. And already that's given a little bit more pop to the footage. Okay, what else have we got? We've got dogs footage. Okay, so we've got some dogs at the beach. Now this shot is fine. The colors and the saturation and the temperature all look really good. But you can see here that in the leaves, they're really dark, and the dog is dark as well. So I'd like to brighten that up. So let's go in and let's experiment with exposure. And I can probably bring up exposure a little bit. The higher I bring it, you'll notice that the clouds start to disappear. So let's bring that down a little bit. Now let's experiment with shadows. Let's bring up the shadows a little bit. Shadows just a tiny bit there. Let's turn our effect off and on and see our progress. Super slight, but it's there. Okay, and now let's see if I want to apply any tint. Green, bit of pink. No, I don't think I want to. Adding green or adding pink doesn't seem to help, so I'm going to reset that to 0. And let's see if I want to cool down the clip or bring it up to be warm. So this is a personal choice, depending on, say, you're doing a video production edit and you have a bunch of shots. Do you want your shots to all be warm and summery like this, or you want them to be a little bit crisper and cooler like this? There's no real correct way to do it. It's all a choice on the effect that you're going for. So I'm going to warm it up a little bit. So it's a little bit warmer there. And now the next thing we're going to do is, down the bottom here you can see Creative. If you click that, you'll get a drop down of some extra ones. And you'll notice that our basic correction is now minimized up there. So we have some extra sliders here, and one of them is Sharpen. So if you slide this to the right, you'll notice that your clip starts to sharpen. If I bring it down to the left, it blurs up a little bit. So if your footage is a little bit soft, you can apply a little bit of sharpening to it. I recommend be very gentle with this slider. Don't give it too much. It may seem like it's good, but you'll start to get jagged lines on horizontal and vertical lines like this, like the fence here. So I'll sharpen it just a tiny bit. Usually cameras already apply sharpening while they're recording, so you shouldn't have to put that in. The next thing is going to be faded film, and this is just a simple effect you can do. It's kind of like an old Insta filter, where it basically lightens all of the footage and makes it seem really soft. So like you're filming a wedding or something like that. So again, this could be a personal choice. You may want to have this kind of style across your whole video. Let's play that back. It's nice and bright. I'll turn the effects off and on. So I like it. I like that effect. And now what you can do is, basic correction is where we do our normal ones, and creative is where we apply this faded film. You also have tick boxes next to each of these. So say you want to see what one of these being off and the other one's on looks like in your footage. Instead of hitting FX, which turns everything on and off, you can hit basic correction on and off. You can hit the creative on and off. So you can see the difference that each section has actually brought to it. Okay, what else can we do? Let's do some flowers. Okay, I've got some flowers here, and these flowers look pretty good. I'm just going to experiment. Let's bring up basic correction. Let's change the temperature, see what we think. To the left, let's go to the right a bit. I think that looks better being warmed up. And now let's see what tint does. Let's add some green, pink, I think just a little tiny bit of pink there. Now let's see about exposure. Let's see what we think. That's probably too bright. You're noticing that the background's getting super bright. Bring it back down and you can see all the detail in there. So let's leave exposure just a tiny bit higher, nothing crazy. Okay, so now let's do shadows. Let's see what shadows will do. And you can see that this brings out all of this detail in here. Set it too high, it looks a little bit washed out. So let's bring it down a little bit there. Let's see, highlights. Bringing the highlights up looks pretty good. Okay, so now let's do some saturation. Take it all the way down the left, it of course goes black and white. If I bring it up, it really starts to pop right here in the flowers there. So let's turn this off and on. So this first shot seemed fine to me. It seemed bright enough, the colors seem nice, but I can see that it's really green and it's not bright enough. Now there's a lot more warmth. Let's see if I want to add a little bit more pink to this. I think where it was good. Okay, so there we go. Now what you can do is, if you're not sure, duplicate that clip by copying and pasting, or you can hold Alt and drag out your clip like that. And on this one, let's make this a little bit cooler. Slide the coolness down like that. And green, I'll keep it with pink there. And now you can hop back and forth between these, and you can see that there's a slight difference. This one's bluer, this one's a bit warmer. And you can decide, which one do I think I like more? Even though warm is nice, maybe I like this cooler one here. So that would be the one that I would keep, and I could delete the other one. Okay, so now we've got, let's say we've got some trees here. Okay, so we've got some trees, and say we filmed this flower shot in the same location as these trees, and they were looking similar. Instead of having to actually do all of these sliders for the trees, what you can do is right-click and copy on the clip you've already colorized, hit copy, and then select your second clip and go right-click, paste attributes. And what this is going to do is it's going to give you a little pop-up here. And all of these options, these are all the attributes of this clip you copied. So there's some motion, there's the opacity, there's a volume, there's a channel volume, and there's also lumetri color, which is this here. So what we want to do is we're going to paste the attributes from this clip onto this one, but we only want lumetri color. So make sure you turn off everything, and then click on lumetri color. This is the only thing we're going to paste. Now hit OK, and the trees should change. Like that. So what that's done is now when I click on trees, you can see that it has the same sliders as the flowers. Now this doesn't work for this shot because this shot was pointing it in a different direction. But say you had, I go back here to the interview shot, say you had some shots of somebody giving an interview, and you have 10 different shots. Let's say these are all the 10 different shots. These are 10 different interview shots. I colorize this first one, I right click and I hit copy, and then I can select all of them, right click, paste attributes, make sure lumetri color is ticked, and usually you don't want anything else ticked unless you know what you're doing and want to paste those attributes, and hit OK, and then all of those interview pieces will have the same colorization on them. And depending on the time of day you shot them at, they all should look basically the same as this. If they don't, you might need to fine-tune one or two of the clips in there. Okay, so that should helpfully show you how easy it is to do some colorization in Premiere. Remember, the first two sliders are often basically all you need. You can fiddle with the brightness here if you like, but footage off the camera, even though it looks a little bit green or blue, not the right color balance, you can quickly and easily change it and fix up your footage. Okay, thank you.